Hello and welcome to the MoonBound Podcast. I'm Julia and I want to welcome you into this space. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about my knitting and my future spinning project, but I also want to talk about a couple of books and I won a contest and I'm really excited about it, so we're going to talk about that too. So first, the knitting. Here is the split back. English today. Here is the split back tank that I'm working on. And if you watch the vlogs, you'll know that I don't actually read patterns. That is the only explanation whatsoever for the mistake I made. So what I was supposed to do is 10 rows into this, I was supposed to slim this down and I was supposed to place markers. I have place markers. And at 10 rows and then again at 16 rows, I was supposed to do what is a very slight decrease. It would have decreased it 4 stitches over the course of those 2 rows. Guess who didn't read the pattern? That'd be this girl. So I didn't do that. I looked at the schematic. It looked like a rectangle until it got up to the top, so I was just knitting. So what I've done is done one of the decreases at what would have been that 10 rows in and then 16 rows in decrease, and then I went up 8 rows and did another decrease, and then when I get to the next 16 rows I am fully decreased. Cat, I'm sorry honey, you can't be on my lap right now. I am now just in the 3rd skein, and I got a broad marker from here done this weekend. My bobbins are looking really light. I don't know if you can see that, but there's almost nothing left in there. Luckily, I have more yarn. So that is going well. I have many skeins left, so it should be no problem. Cruising along. These socks now have both cuffs, and I have decided to do the Union Station pattern. So that will be moving forward. So far, I haven't failed to read the pattern yet. Of course, I didn't actually print out either one of these patterns, so that could be at least part of my problem. I really, really want to do the Lillian Tinned hat by Arctic Knitting. Lily designed this beautiful hat, and it's got pine trees, and it ends up with some snowflakes, and the crown of the hat is a star. And I really, really, really want to do this color work. So I have to clear one of these off my needles so that I can start that. The other thing I want to do is I plan to spin the yarn myself. I have a Finn Shetland combo fiber-wise, and I am going to use that for one of the colors. So over the course of the next week, I'm going to be spinning for that project. As far as spinning, I thought that we could talk about the mystery spin because I'm still trying to come to grips with where I'm going with it. There's part of me that just wants to turn this all into one big, dramatic, lovely boucle, but I don't think that's a great idea. I have opened the bin on my lap in case you can't quite tell what's going on. Because I wanted to talk about staple length. One of my lovely viewers had a question about staple length and how I was going to put this together. So this is the staple length for the alpaca, the darker colored alpaca that I've got in there. And there's a ruler up for reference. And that's not too bad. Let's look at the lighter color. We're just going to look at all the different staple lengths. So the lighter colored alpaca. Not a great example. There we go. The lighter colored alpaca is much shorter. It is also, as I said, finer. This is a much softer, the fibers themselves. Hopefully you can see that. And the fibers themselves are much finer than the darker colored. The darker colored, it's not that it isn't fine, it's that there's lots of guard hair. And it is just a little coarser, a little straighter, and a little darker. So those are our alpacas. I would qualify both of those as something that I would spin in a more short style. So in trying to figure out how I'm going to combine these fibers, I need to think about their staple length and how it goes together. Now, here, this ruler is not going to be good enough. Here is the mohair. And that is, I'm firmly tugging on that. So it is longer than my little 6-inch ruler, but not necessarily consistently longer than that ruler. So I would definitely call this mohair in with the longs. So we're going to make a little pile over here. And you can spin short fibered right next to long fibered. It just requires more patience. There is absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. So again, these are not really short fibers, these wools, but in comparison, so this is a full 6 inches. This is the brown sheep. I really hope that's coming through well for you. If not, I will cut this entire section out and put in stills. But I'm hoping that this method is working. But the rayon, let's say, this is not super short. But there's a big difference between this little fiber of rayon. That's wanting to pull. In length, which, if I'm being really generous, is 3, but is probably not actually 3 on average. And say that mohair, which is solidly an 8. So it's going to spin better if I put it next to a short fiber. I'm going to have less trouble with it. I can make it work, but it's going to work better if I put the shorter fibers with the shorter fibers and the longer fibers with the longer fibers. Here's the Lincoln. And that's in a lock, and there's no question about the length. There's no fussing around with that. That is probably touching 9 by the time we're done with it. And so it is going to be more friendly to spin if I spin the Lincoln with the mohair. The Corriedale is shorter. Let's see if I can find a good, but it's not super short. It's just short compared to the others. Something like cotton or yak is really short, but I'm getting a good 6 inches off this. Maybe, yeah. If I were being generous, I might pop it to 7, but I think overall this Corriedale is probably about 6 inches. So if I were going to spin this and sort this according to size, without taking into account, I did this completely wrong. My notes on how many ounces are underneath my camera right now, so we won't be talking about that. But if I were going to sort this completely based on staple length, I would want to spin the Corriedale, the Lincoln, and the mohair together. Now, from a color standpoint, that's not really terrible, is it? That looks pretty good. But from a weight standpoint, I'm not going to have enough, because I have a big old chunk of alpaca, and I have 2 big old chunks of alpaca. And while this rose doesn't seem like there's that much there, it is a heavier fiber. It weighs more. The individual fiber weighs more. And that's something you have to consider when putting it together. So I still haven't decided all of this talking, but this is just a little window into the way to do it. Now, I could totally do this by color, and if I were inclined to do this by color, I would probably put the brown sheep in with the longer colors and use the alpaca with the rose. If I were just doing it by color, I would do the light browns and the green, and I do the whites and the black grays together. And just hope that it all worked out, which is not a great starting plan for it. Sometimes hoping it all works out is great. And if I were to do it that way, I would put these beads in with the alpaca rose and these beads on the long wool, which basically means in my head I've designed 2 yarns, which isn't the goal of this challenge, which is why I haven't started spinning it yet, because I do have to get it all together. Now, what about the thrums, you're saying? Or maybe you're not. The thrums can get added into any of the fibers. When I'm blending it, I'm going to cut these. And traditionally you would cut them anywhere shorter than 2.5 inches. And then you would card them in to the fiber. I haven't decided that I'm carding the fiber yet. So the thrums actually I may cut them really, really small and throw them in as an add-in, like I would do in Angelina on the fly. So again, I have basically just talked myself in a circle and I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. So just because we know what the fiber is doesn't mean we know what the mystery spin is. I'm going to have to set myself a deadline on this to decide when exactly I'm going to get it done, because I want to spin it. It's all really lovely fiber and it will be fun to spin. And I'm looking forward to it. I just have to get over this decision paralysis that's going on there. So I read a couple of books this week, and I'm going to talk about them real quick. I follow Esther Emery on YouTube, and I have for about a year, and I finally got around to ordering her book, What Falls from the Sky. And it's really good. It chronicles her change from being this ambitious, go, modern career woman to being the woman she is that you see on YouTube, living in a yurt in a house that they're building themselves. It's very well written, it's very poetic, it's very thoughtful, and I really enjoyed it. In fact, I enjoyed it so much that I read it in like a day and a half. To the exclusion of the other things that I should have been reading. The things that I should have been reading is this, which I did not and am not enjoying. I am 3 or 4 chapters in, and this book was written in 1970. And he tried to be very thorough and very technical for 1970. Which means that the section on synthetic fibers, while interesting, is not really accurate. And also the sections when he discusses the breeds is also not really accurate, because, well, farmers have been breeding the sheep for 47 more years, which is a lot of generations of sheep. And they're not the same. Or they're not the same as what he had access to. And some of the terminology has just changed, and some of it is stuff that I don't know if it ever was a great explanation. He goes into a lot of detail about 3-tex, which is something I've never heard any other book talk about. And it sounds like he's trying to describe grist, but failing to account for the different weights of different fibers. So I'm not really sure. I'm having a hard time getting through this book, if you can't tell. He is describing everything really well. But I'm not certain how useful it is to me as a current modern spinner. So we'll see. But we're working on it. There is information here on carding cloths and different bends in the angles of the teeth that is interesting if it still applies. I haven't ever seen anyone talking about selling different combs for how strenuously you're going to be pulling. So I'm not sure, but there is that book. I am working on it. I am reading it. So I also follow Wool and Spinning on YouTube, just Wool for Pearls. And in her December episode, she had a giveaway, and I won. So I am going to be receiving a skein of yarn from an indie dyer out of Georgia. That'd be the United States Georgia, not the European Georgia. And the company name is Glow Beauty from Within. And the yarn looks absolutely beautiful. And I'm so excited. I never win any of these things. And I really, really admire her work. It looks really good. She was super friendly on our conversations, and when it gets here, I am going to want to immediately cast on a shawl, so I need to get done with these things so that I can start the next set of knitting. So, very excited about that. Rachel over at Wool and Spinning is also doing kind of a book club thing, and she's recommended reading this book. And she's going to do this on her Ravelry page. I'm not entirely certain. I just picked it up from my library today. But it has essays by all sorts of super famous spinners and knitters. And so I'm looking forward to reading that. So I want to read this book. I'm going to try to slog through the other one. But it is a slog. I have absolutely nothing finished to show you. So better luck next time. Sorry about that. We are going to try for Tuesdays for the podcast sit down chatty type episode, and I'm going to look at Saturdays for the blog moving forward. I just can't seem to do Friday. And I can't seem to do Monday. So we're going to try for Tuesdays and Saturdays and see if that helps. And Racer, your claw is in my leg. I'm also going to try to learn how to knit in the Portuguese style with pins. And I was on a discussion group with fibromyalgia sufferers and talking about hand pain and it limiting crafting. And one of the consistent suggestions that lots of people gave, and it is in fact why I taught myself to knit continental, was I wanted to give this hand a break. One Christmas, this thumb just swelled up like literally 3 times the size, and I couldn't move it from trying to crisis Christmas craft. And so last year I decided, well, I'm going to teach myself continental, and I like it a lot, and it's so much faster than what I had been doing that I didn't switch back to English style knitting. And so with continuing to have more hand pain, I'm going to switch it up again and try Portuguese. And then, hi, I'm back. There was a little problem with the filming. I'm not really sure what happened. It stopped, and it stopped before I noticed it had stopped. And so I thought that it hadn't recorded anything, but it had. So I retook the entire thing, and then it stopped again because its battery was dead again before I was finished. So I was very frustrated. I was talking before about changing up how I knit in an effort both to learn new skills and to provide some ease on the pain I've been having in my hand. So I'm going to learn the Portuguese knitting, and then I am going to learn the style of knitting where you have a spoon or a prop, or I'm not really sure what it's called. That's next. That's a while from now. But that's what I was doing. Also, I did start my bullet journal. I'm not certain that it's going to work. But I've created a nice long list. That's just today's, so we'll see what happens with that. But we are sticking with it. In the interest of not having my camera shut off on me again, I am going to say thank you for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.